So it's very difficult to follow. I don't know what to do. One of my favorite terms he used in the paper was the word promiscuous, which was the promiscuous use of terms. And so some of the things that I'm thinking about are kind of based on having really grown up with in academia with Eileen and learning what evidence-based medicine and what evidence-based practice actually is and how it originated. And I remember in 282, the research series, where I was a TA for Eileen, and she had me read the Sackett book. He said, I think we'll use this, the evidence-based medicine book, for this class. And I was kind of used to it at that point in time. You know, I'd come and talk and said, well, I was at the optometry library, and I was checking out this article by so-and-so. So I was kind of used to it at that point, but this book spoke a truth that even the students saw over time. I'm also disposed to writing articles with titles of songs, and so I would, for this article where I was writing, would be what are words for when no one listens anymore. And I don't think it's a small argument. What is EVP? Really, what is evidence-based practice? What is evidence-informed practice? When we throw the words around a lot, they take on different meanings. They almost get hijacked. And I think it's very important what Bruce says in the chapter. Again, evidence-based practice is based on evidence-based medicine, and it is an individual, at least, you know, there's more to it than that, but it is a way of posing a question, looking for the literature relevant to that question, appraising it with respect to its rigor and applicability to clients. And that is at the heart of it what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't interventions out there that have empirical support, but using them does not evidence-based practice make, and I think that's crucial. Because we all know, if I sat here and I said, hey, is it okay to just give everybody service X? We found it to be effective. Or problem Y. Every time. No, you can't hear any of that. We just have to use that. We all rail against it. But what it means if we rail against it, it means that we have to do something else, and that something else has to be a systematic approach. And there is a method, thankfully, for doing that. I want to point out that we make a lot of assumptions when we use words. Even the word systematic. I've noticed lately that there are a lot of systematic reviews out there. Not really. The term is being used a lot. It's being hijacked. Systematic review is a very complicated and lengthy endeavor indeed. And these things are available at Campbell Collaboration, free of charge, www.campbellcollaboration.org, and represent years and years of work of people combing over the intervention literature and actually finding, combining studies through meta-analysis and coming up with an effect size at a 30,000 foot level. Does that apply at an individual level? Maybe, maybe not. Knowing nothing else, what's my best guess? I'm going to start there. And we're going to work forward. EIP, and I'll end here and pass the torch. Evidence-informed practice is the new thing. I'm theoretically supposed to know about this, since that's what my position says. But there are a lot of differences in what is evidence-informed practice. And in looking back over, I did a big old search because I was curious about this. The first time it was ever used that I found was in medical literature by Entwistle in 1998. So that's a while ago. And it was used in terms of evidence-informed patient choice. It was next used in 1999, Hargraves in education, absolutely and unequivocally referring back to the Sackett model of evidence-based practice and saying basically evidence-informed is kind of a better word for this because it's not based on evidence, it's informed. The decisions are informed by the evidence. 2001, Schreier came out with evidence-informed practice in medicine. So these terms were around, and in 2005, Ian Chalmers basically picked up on that and said, if you were to rename this thing, basically, it would be evidence-informed practice. So I just want to stress the importance of words, and it's really important, and it doesn't mean that evidence-based practice or evidence-informed practice doesn't include empirically supported treatments, whatever those are, and we can have a discussion on how we define those. But it's much more inclusive than that. And in fact, even in the Sackett model, there is room for what he called foreground questions and background questions. So background questions, all the epidemiological data, all the information that's in your agencies, maybe even in the form of administrative data. How do patients, how do clients, how do whoever flow through your system? Those are crucial bits of information. That is evidence. Is it an RCT? No. Does it make part of the patchwork that informs our choices? Yes, absolutely. And we, I'll end with this. There are different ways of knowing. We've all heard that. There are different ways of knowing. That does not mean that all ways of knowing are equally valid for all questions. You have different questions, you have different methods to answer those questions. Sometimes we need a range of methods to even approximate an answer. So with that, I just want to open up EDP. The idea is a more expansive type of thing than just finding that empirical supported treatment.
So that's one decision I don't have to make.
Thank you. This is why I'm not an engineer. I'm very glad that Bruce has spent some time distinguishing between the process of evidence-based practice and so-called EVPs. When I first found that book, what I loved about it, I think the closest definition to me that represents that is that evidence-based practice is a way to handle the inevitable uncertainty in making decisions in an ethical manner. And there's so much in that brief little thing, the conscientious, judicious, what's the third one? Explicit use, meaning that we should be clear. Like, I think it's extremely important in system-wide implementation, which I think are very important to look at these organizational aspects that affect what practitioners do, to also have clear examples. Like in our Alameda project, where we worked with 450 children many, many years ago with some of my colleagues, Ted Stein and Kermit Wiltsey. In our final presentation of that book, there were 40 pages devoted to 3 case examples of what we did on the ground. If I'm a practitioner, I want to see what you actually did, and when you did it, and why you did it. There's a great need for clarity. Where I think it would be a dreadful mistake to just combine the two into one big idea is that, to me, what I love about the original literature, there's a deep concern with clients. There's a deep concern, which we are not paying attention to at all, to gather the questions that arise, as the English say, at the coalface. What are the questions that the client and practitioner have, which are actually being collected now and have been for many years in the UK. I spoke to Paul Glasgow in 2009, and he said at that time they were collecting all the questions that arise between physicians and their patients in 3 large areas in the UK, and they were just arranging to combine all these questions and then prioritize them in terms of how frequently they come up. And the ones that come up very often, well, do we know anything about them? And if we don't know any answers, that would have a very high research priority. I also think it's important to think about how we frame problems. Like another thing that I hear, I call them avoidable distractions. I think I spent half my time in the last 10 years begging people not to misrepresent this idea. Any big idea throughout history, it seems to me, has been misrepresented or ignored, including the poor Semmelweis, the discovery. In terms of people would actually read the reports back then, his colleagues would look, well, I don't see anything on the hand, because he was saying something is transmitting this. And then they would laugh and laugh, which shows their enormous naivete that we can actually see things that influence us. I think one of the huge gaps, the kind of data mining, if you want to use that term, we should do is to actually collect the questions that arise between clients and practitioners. And I also think we should also collect opportunities that practitioners have to act ethically, and when they don't, and use that to inform the steps we should take to improve that. I think we should immediately start taking advantage of in the ENQUISL, informed client choice form, where if I go to you and you refer me to the Gamble Parent Training Program, I give you this form and you have to fill it out. And it says the Gamble, it has the 4 or 5 categories here. One is that, well, the Gamble program has been well tested with people like you and been found to be effective. Then it says that we don't know anything about the Gamble Parent Training Program. And the last one, yes, the Gamble Training Program has been very carefully evaluated, and your skills are likely to get worse as a result of going to this program. And then you actually have to tell me what agency you're referring me to, because we all know how important referrals are in our own lives. The first thing we say, well, where are we going? And then the third thing is that what staff person will you see in that agency? Because we also all know that even physicians within a little group differ in how good they are, probably, with particular problems. So I think, and I'd just like to sum up with saying I really am so concerned about how we're framing problems. The research grants must be couched in psychiatric. We continually urge our students to think about oppression and discrimination, meanwhile training them in this, many times in psychiatric nomenclature. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've come up with the idea, I think I'm working with Mimi Abramovitz at Hunter, to come up with a one-page scale called the Environmental Deprivation Index that a social worker would have to fill out also each time. Like, what about the quality of daycare? What about the quality of transportation? And that data would be collated over agencies. And then I think we have to be much more active in identifying, describing, and exposing and advocating for doing something about our clients' avoidable suffering. If you can send a undercover video person into the Smithfield pig farms to see how they care for their pregnant pigs in these tiny cages with 1 inch on one side, don't we need something more exposure of what's going on in some of these dreadful residential centers? They're still digging up bodies in Florida from that residential center down there. So I think I love the way evidence-informed practice attends to the ethical issues and getting down to the ground level and involving clients in the collection of what we're doing to what effect.